Sure, good.
You're live.
Okay, welcome to the Tuesday, February 14th work study meeting. If we could all stand up and say the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
A roll call. Director Asner. Director Byers. Here. Director Faulkner.
Here.
Director Hudson. Here. Director Moeller.
Here.
Vice President Patros. Here. And President Cooney.
Here.
First thing on our agenda, well, just to remind everyone, we've got 20 minutes for each presenter, 20 minutes per board member for questions and conversation.
The people do not have to take the full 20 minutes. Just throw that out too. You can if you want.
Sure.
You want to
Five is good. So first thing on our agenda, 2.01, we have the 5-year curriculum and instruction plan update.
Good evening, Vice President Patros, Board of Education, Dr. Keenan. My name is Molly Bolton, and I am the Executive Director of Teaching, Learning, and Accountability. And tonight I'm here to present the 5-year plan for our curriculum and instruction, an update on that plan. Next slide, please. The purpose of the presentation is just to update you guys on the 5-year plan. A few quick definitions and reminders. The difference between curriculum and instruction. So first of all, the curriculum is the how, the what, not the how, and it helps us to provide continuity across our schools and across the district. It really comes down to what do we want our students to know and be able to do. And so that's kind of the question that it answers. But it does help guide our teachers to understand the scope and sequence of skills needed, as well as it ensures all state standards are addressed, which is mandated by DESE. When we think about instruction, we think about that's how we present the curriculum. And so that can vary from classroom to classroom and student to student, depending upon those student needs. And also we may use a variety of materials and strategies within that. But you have to have both curriculum and instruction for learning to occur. Next slide, please. Graphic really talks about how you have to have curriculum, instruction, as well as assessment, and all of that centers around the student. So just a quick review of our 4 major goals for curriculum and instruction. First of all, the review of curriculum for both the SSD schools and the career and technical schools, that it will be reviewed and updated regularly. The second being that materials and textbooks are refreshed on a regular schedule so that we're keeping up to date. The third is that instruction is supplemented and augmented in the partner districts to be able to meet all the needs of our students. And then the fourth is that our staff are supported, really with that high quality instruction, as well as those high leverage practices for special education and utilizing high yield strategies. So if you take a look at our progress, we are on target for completion of all our curriculum reviews this year, and I'll kind of go through what those are in just a few minutes. We are also on target for our review of materials for this upcoming year. Our directors have just submitted their integrated tiered models from the partner districts for the annual updates and their gap analysis, and so we're in the process of reviewing those. March 1st, they will submit their professional learning plans for next year. And then also on goal 4, our instructional coaches are working on their observations and feedback for all teachers. We have completed our universal walkthroughs and observations for the first semester, as well as looking at those high leverage practices. Next slide, please. So with the first goal, you can see on the slide there, this is just, the first graphic is just a review of what our process looks like. And these are the courses that were reviewed or written this year. These courses will come to you in June, or maybe May or June, for your approval for implementation for the following year. Next slide, please. For goal number 2, the different materials that we are looking at adopting this year for our students who are assessed on math for K through 5 science, and then our middle school social emotional materials and health materials. In our career and technical schools, we are looking at floor laying, multimedia, and culinary. We added a unit for baking, and so we're looking for some resources for baking. We also are going to be implementing our centralized purchasing, which we utilize for our larger vendors. And that way we can, by purchasing in bulk, we're able then to take advantage of discounts and free materials. This will be our 3rd year doing it. Last year was better than our first, and we anticipate this year to be even more efficient. Slide, please. With our 3rd goal, as I stated before, our integrated models and gap analysis have been turned in for review, and our professional learning plans will be coming to us March 1st. And so that really helps us be proactive in planning for the needs of our staff. Also, multi-tiered systems of support, which you'll be hearing a program monitoring report in just a few minutes about that. But our targeted districts for this year have been Riverview, Ferguson, Florissant, Hazelwood, Jennings, Normandy, Melville, the leadership schools, as well as University City and Hancock Place. Slide 6. And then our last one is goal 4. So our universal walkthroughs, we did update those forms this year and had a walkthrough and an observation for universals, which are those practices that are known to be supportive of students' learning. So those all took place this first semester, and we have analyzed that data, and directors and administrators have created action plans. We're continuing our Tier 2, Tier 3 supports in our 3 big areas of literacy, numeracy, and social emotional learning. Our para induction program continues. And actually, with DLT today, we just shared out our para needs survey for professional development, and the feedback that we've gotten from that has been extremely positive, so we're excited about that. We did add a para coach position this year. We'll be adding 2 more of those next year, and those are funded through a grant from DESE. Also, we have very focused professional learning for our administrators around special education process, as well as developing leadership. And then we are continuing our foundational learning for our teachers in literacy and numeracy. We're using a Keys to Literacy program, which has received really good feedback from our teachers, that it's very practical. They're able to take that and move it into the classroom right away after the training. And then numbers is one that we've had for a couple of years now, and that continues to help build numeracy. We are exploring some social emotional foundational trainings as well. So we have some folks going through some training this spring to hopefully help us with foundational social emotional. When we look at goal 4, that's what I just looked at. So with that, I'll talk to you a little bit about our future plans. If you'll go to the next slide, please. So we are in the midst of planning our Summer Leadership Institute for our principals throughout the county, supporting special education as well as special education process. We also are finishing up our work on Common Formative within our SSD schools, as well as starting some work with proficiency skills. And that comes from the competency-based learning that DESE is digging deeper into, and we are actually a part of a cohort learning more about competency-based learning. So those proficiency skills support that. We are increasing some teacher mentoring opportunities throughout that 2nd year, and that comes from that teacher retention grant. And then also creating some model classrooms. And these classrooms will be some of our high-performing teachers, where they will welcome teachers to come into their classrooms to learn about their practices, and also will support them with resources. So we're planning to do interview process, and roll that out for next year. Those teachers will be paid a stipend with the grant that we have from DESE, for their extra effort in, supporting teachers coming through, as well as preparing some materials, for other teachers to utilize. And then, as I stated before, we have that paraprofessional coach position, and we're adding 2 additional this next year. Next slide, please. And that brings us to any questions that you might have.
On your future plans, I'm curious, on the Summer Principal Institute.
Yes.
Are those our individuals, are those principals in the different schools?
They are principals from the partner district, yes.
Is there a way that we can make sure that each year that's done, they get a copy of the partnership plan and a copy of their signed assurance plan? I just think they're the ones who really have to implement. We can say what we want about different superintendents of the different boards, principals that have to be. I'd love to make sure that they had a copy too.
Absolutely, we can do that. We can provide that in their registration folders. Any other questions?
My question, if we go back to page 6 in reference to our tech courses being reviewed,
Yes.
in reviewing those, how are we standing in reference to the student participation?
As far as student participation, some of these courses are actually what we call academic integration courses. So those courses would include math for machining, technical writing, and zoology. So those are courses that we teach alongside some of our technical classes. For example, zoology is offered with VetTech. And so it's the enrollment in those programs that then feed into these courses. So they're kind of interwoven into the actual tech courses, but they are academic credits.
So again, student participation, particularly at North County Tech, what kind of participation are we getting in reference to students in North County?
So I can get you numbers for each of the programs and share that in your Friday package. That would be helpful.
It would.
Okay. Absolutely.
And we're going to be giving an update on CTE in April, so there'll be a full update on all of the information on participation courses.
So one of the things too, and I guess I was going to call Kevin to find out, I have been talking to other board members from other districts, and information we have is, North County Tech, we're down on students participating from various districts. So I'd like to set up a time, Kevin, to be able to come to the school and possibly bring some of the other superintendents with me. In reference to, most of them have not gone through tech in some time now. So I'm thinking in terms of maybe there's something we can do to try to encourage students more so. I know that we have the problem as far as cosmetology in reference to the waiting list. But in some of the rest of the courses, I'm interested in knowing how many kids are we actually serving now. If it's down, then what are we looking at in reference to renewing that particular interest, or is it something else that we might need to use the space to accommodate?
So what we can do is we can provide you with students that are currently enrolled in the trends for the last few years, so you can kind of compare them to previous years.
And some of that is in about the numbers that you gave us, is it not?
Yeah.
Okay, so I know that, and so be able to walk through and see myself along with some of the other board members, I think that if in fact if there's some kind of way that the word is not getting out to the kids, that we can do something specifically in each one of the districts to try to encourage more.
Any other questions or comments?
I do. Dr. Gould, thank you for your presentation.
Absolutely.
I'm curious about the teacher retention grant.
Yes.
Give us some background on that.
So it is a 3-year grant. We are currently in year 2. And so, what we've done is we've looked at a variety of different ways we can retain teachers. So, for example, the para coaches, what that came out of was one of the pieces that teachers often talked about was the turnover of paras in their classrooms and how much energy and time it was taking to retrain staff. So therefore, we thought if we have a strong para program and supporting those paras, there's less turnover there, which causes less stress for the teachers. We are also looking at the mentoring piece. We do welcome kits for both the teachers and the paras. So when they come into our district, they receive, our teachers receive a $500, for lack of a better word, we pay for $500 of materials to meet the needs of their student in the classroom. We also spend $500 on a classroom library, so they will have books in their classroom appropriate for their students, as well as we give them a big box full of all those teacher things like Post-it notes, staplers, hole punch, file folders, all those things that we know teachers spend a lot of their own money on. To get them kick-started out, so they're not having to spend their money on those things.
Are those funds that are likely to be re-upped after the third year?
So we are working very diligently to find a way to sustain that. And so, with the para coaches, we are taking some data to see impact, because we want to make sure it's impactful if we're going to spend some money on it, right? So we'll probably be bringing you an update on that next year. And then if we did decide to keep those positions moving, that would come through the budgeting process next year. Yeah, I think one of the challenges we are facing, though, is definitely, we'd like to do year two teacher mentors. We're having a hard time finding teachers to take that on, so we're having to be creative and find different ways that we can support those year two teachers, maybe more in a cohort model or something along those lines.
I had a question about high leverage practices. Could you talk more about those,
Absolutely. So there are 4 domains of those practices. So collaboration, assessment, instruction, and the fourth one I'll have to get back to you on because it's just leaving my mind right now. But there are strategies then underneath each of those. For example, under collaboration is working with other professionals. It's also working with families. Under assessment, it goes through making database decisions, matching assessment to instruction, those sorts of things. And then high leverage practice, the instructional pieces are like supports and scaffolding, looking at behavior intervention plans, functional behavior analysis. So there are lots of strategies underneath those as well. And so those are practices that research has shown us are highly effective when working with students with disabilities. They come from the Council of Exceptional Children and then another agency called CEDAR that does a lot of educational research. And I'd be more than happy to share just kind of a overview sheet with you with each one of those strategies explained a little bit. And those are things that we begin as soon as our new teachers come in. We're working with them on explicit instruction and those sorts of things so that they're utilizing those strategies and embedding them in their practice.
any other questions? Thank you so much. Next on the agenda for 2.02, we have program monitoring report.
Nice. Good evening again. So with me, I also have Carla Reichert, who is the Evaluation and Research Associate. She works with Matt Trouble, who is with me often with these reports, but this time it's Carla's turn. So if you'll go to the next slide, please. Just a reminder, these reports are part of our DESE requirements for program evaluation and monitoring, and really just helps keep folks informed of how our different programs are doing. And it definitely ensures that we're looking at that continuous improvement model amongst using our data and then making decisions and creating action plans to support. So the monitoring reports we have for you this evening are multi-tiered systems of support, which I talked to you about just a little bit earlier, professional learning, technology services, transportation, as well as student health services. So with that, I will turn it over to Carla. Next slide, please.
Good evening. So before we get started, I'll just reacquaint you with what you're looking at when you are reviewing a monitoring report. In the first column are our key indicators. What we have there is, in consultation with the program area, they determine what is key to delivering their services or what's really the most important aspect of what they do. So we've tried to keep those high level. Then we have, in connection with those program areas, developed their targets. And then the results column will have multiple years just to show the trend over time. If the result is in blue, it means the program is either on or above target, and orange means there's opportunity for improvement. As for the supporting details section, if you see terminology in the first column that does not sound familiar, it's usually explained in that final column, or it might explain any type of discrepancies you might see in the results or need an explanation as to why it looks the way that it does. Next slide, please. So we'll start with multi-tiered systems of support, which is MTSS. Just in case MTSS is unfamiliar to you or that it has slipped your mind, I'll just give you a brief overview. So it is a tiered framework that brings together 3 domains. That's the behavior, social, emotional, and academic domains. It is a tiered structure bringing together all those evidence-based practices that align with those 3 areas. It is particularly important because it brings benefits if implemented systematically in a strong MTSS. It would result in reductions in special education referrals, out-of-school suspensions, disciplinary referrals, and it can also increase students' academic outcomes and provide more positive school climates. So we see many benefits from implementing MTSS. As Molly alluded to in her previous presentation, our service delivery model recently changed within the last 2 years, and so now our MTSS team provides consultation support at the district level. They're currently working with 9 partner districts who they have committed agreements with at the superintendent level, although 7 of those partnerships are active. So the 2 that are not had competing priorities this year, and we'll be revisiting MTSS implementation hopefully next year. So if we look at the results for the MTSS team, we can see that they are actively working with their partners, meaning they're meeting on a monthly basis to go through their implementation plans and to move them forward. We can also see of those who have finalized implementation plans in the third indicator that they are all showing improvements in their MTSS implementation. Now, the second indicator might leave you with some questions. So this is the percentage of districts that have finalized implementation plans. Now, there is no standard timeline for how long it takes to complete an implementation plan, and that's because the team actively works with their partners to assess what their capacity level is like, meaning what resources they have available, what the skill set is like of their staff, and then they develop a tailored plan. So for some districts, that's more intensive, and others are much further along, and that's why you see what you see in that result there. I will let you know what you're looking at says 2 out of 7. Since submitting this report, we are now at 3 out of 7, so 46% of those districts have a finalized implementation plan. The others are well on their way. Next slide. Professional learning. As you can see with these results, they have a strong record of offering quality professional learning. They consistently have high ratings from their participants in terms of satisfaction and their intention to implement strategies learned in their sessions. As for the third indicator related to fidelity, this is based on their coaching model. So they offer professional learning, and then they offer 2 additional coaching sessions on site. They have recently expanded their offerings for coaching support. So when you look at the results for that column, those years are not really comparable simply because in 2019, they were only offering job-embedded support around high leverage practices. Since then, they have expanded that reach to include literacy, numeracy, social emotional learning, and autism. So their reach is significantly broader. At this point, you're probably well used to the asterisk beside 2020. There was a disruption in data collection, of course, and as you can see, there was a significantly lower level of on-site consultations. And for student health services, which is our next slide, staffing continues to be an issue in our, with our nursing team. There are significant school nurse shortages. And at this point, we have made the second indicator related to the substitute pool is inactive, simply because with the shortages in our nursing pool, or in our permanent nursing positions, it just does not make sense to actively work on building that pool. So we are using a staffing agency at this point in time, but eventually we would hope to revisit or return to that model. Obviously, these staff shortages are impacting students. So the third indicator, we can see that the total number of days of students had to miss school due to not having one-on-one nurse shortages has increased to 4 days. I will note that there is a connection in the action plan, that the team is actively working with OESE to recruit and retain school nurses. And for technology services, they have consistently strong results as it relates to timely tech support and their customer service ratings. As for the third indicator related to the refresh cycle of laptops and desktop computers, this is a new indicator. They have recently switched to a 4-year refresh cycle. What you'll see in this indicator here, they are close to their target. What has been a bit of a challenge in meeting that target is that a couple of our districts are on a 5-year refresh cycle, so they're falling just slightly outside of the window that we set as our own target. However, in the action plan, you will see that the Technology Services Department is working on formalizing their 4-year refresh cycle process, and that will hopefully address some of those challenges there. And last but not least, on to transportation. So transportation, much like our nursing department, is experiencing staffing challenges. This is not new. You heard this the last time we came forward too. Their availability of drivers and aides is impacting indicator 2 and 3. However, their on-time bus arrivals just slightly under target, but nothing of concern there. And as for our number of elementary students on routes over 60 minutes, that has improved and is now on target. Again, you'll see our action plans here reflect a focus on recruitment and retention of drivers and aides. And that leads us to, if you have any questions. Anybody have any questions?
I have one about the busing.
Sure.
Things that I remember that we're having difficulties in the North County area. I think it was 95 or something was used. Is that the routing that?
The number of routes.
The number of routes. And we've outsourced that particular service in North County. How is that working for us?
That is, oh, Dr. Keenan, were you?
I think Jeff can.
Oh.
Hi, good evening. So we monitor that. We currently contract with Student Transportation of America. And so Kenny, who you met last time, was here. He meets with them regularly. We have our managers go up there to make sure things are running well. We have STA provide a report daily that talks about the number of open routes so that we can monitor them. Today there were 2. Yesterday there weren't any. So we monitor them regularly. We ask for their pipeline of training so that we can see who is coming in, who they are getting, and who they are testing to drive. So we continually monitor that. We asked them the other day as far as staffing, and I believe they were only 2 routes short. So, and they're filling those on a daily basis. They're not losing routes because they're short drivers. They lose routes to daily call-offs and sickness. So we monitor that all the time. It was a big deal in the beginning of the year. We put in some plans, and right now it is pretty much on track with what our garages are doing as well.
Does the service, we're providing the buses and they're just providing, no? They provide both bus and
They do. Yeah, so we provide the garage, we provide the building, but they provide the management, the staffing, the mechanics of the buses. So all of those buses are theirs.
So right now, that's an outsourced contract that we're giving.
It is, it's a third-party contract to Student Transportation of America.
How many drivers is required to fulfill the routing that we have?
We always go with the number of routes that are up there, and then we always put on 10 standby. So our central garage has the number of routes and then set number of standby. So really, we're looking at like 2 short up there, and I can update you with the actual numbers in the Friday packet. But really, they are, we just asked the other day, it's not a very wide gap between being fully staffed and where they're at.
So I'm asking that to see if in fact that there is are they the only service right now that we have access to?
The only third-party bus service,
Are they the only ones that we actually have access to who are doing that right now?
yes, because we're under contract. So we went out to bid several years ago, and then we are currently with them. And I believe we're going into, this is the first extension year. We have one more for next year, and then we'd be looking at going out to bid again. And then we would have access to the other transportation companies to bid on that.
Okay, so our contract now goes through another year before
Yes.
we'll be able to, to do that. And you'll send me the information in reference to the number of drivers that that contract requires to have
Mm-hmm.
fulfill that.
Yes.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Page 4, rather, multi-tiered systems of support. The numbers on that second line there are concerning when it comes to helping districts that if they don't have an implementation plan, can you describe from our side?
So
help that out?
Yeah, absolutely. The implementation plan is developed in collaboration with the partner districts. So our MTSS facilitators are chairing those meetings and are doing all those assessments as to the resources they have available, the skill sets that need to be developed. So the plan is simply at the point where it's on paper, but the work they are doing is all of the brainstorming around what needs to happen to move forward on such a plan.
And that would include also data analysis, so gathering all the data that district has and doing an analysis, so that they can have an action plan or an implementation plan that's built upon a firm foundation.
So multi-tiered supports that's happening in those districts, if there isn't the implementation plan finalized, still tiered supports happening in those schools, no?
Absolutely.
Okay.
So the district, they're working at the district level, so they are trying to ensure that MTSS is available in a wide variety of buildings. So it means that there is probably patchwork across the district, but they're trying to have a more systematic approach that's a unified vision for the district. But to maybe answer your question even further, if you flip to the supplemental data chart, it's on the back of that report.
Actually, you don't have.
Oh, I'm sorry.
These are in the board docs and that you received are the actual reports.
Well, in the board docs, there is a table, and it does give you a little bit more detail of the status of each district. So you can see, once you take a look at those ones, that the majority of the districts are implementing action plans. Now, it's an action plan for what they plan to accomplish in that year. The action plans that we're referring to on the front, though, is the overarching plan for district-wide implementation. So it's not to say that there are no plans in place, it's just a different, different amount of levity to that plan, I guess.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
And lastly on our agenda, we have fiscal year 2024 preliminary budget update.
They're gonna go fast. 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
Good evening, Vice President Potrop, Board of Education, and Dr. Keenan. My name is Jeff Hogg. I'm the Chief Operations Officer for Special School District. I'll be joined this evening by Chiquita Moore, Wendy Pendergrass, Michael Macklin, and Philip Boyd. And tonight we will present the preliminary budget. Next slide, please. As you can see on the screen, the SSD, Special School District mission and vision. Our mission is to support and empower students of all learning abilities to excel to their greatest potential. Our vision, all students realize their full potential in life and learning. Next slide, please. And then on the screen are our SSD values, equity, commitment, and collaboration. Next slide, please. We put those two prior slides up there so that we can show you how the budget goals support the SSD goals and mission as a whole. We have equity, and we look at that with funding towards our schools and our partner districts. We look at staffing, we look at our curricular support, and then we look at facilities. Those four goals support the mission, vision, and values of the district. Next slide, please.
Good evening. Enrollment trends. Next slide, please. So when you look at St. Louis County as a whole, we put up some data where across St. Louis County, enrollment of students into public education is going down a little bit. Our evaluation, if you see for 21-22 of students that are qualifying for SSD services is at 20,000, and we used to be a lot higher than that. I can tell you that we are now seeing a trend as of this year for evaluations being requested by a numerous amount of people, families, school systems, where we're working through the care team process. And right now, currently, we have done evaluations that completely, like last year's total evaluation, we have reached those evaluations right now currently. It is custom that in the spring, we start to do more evaluations, there's a little bit more requests. So we are easily seeing that evaluation for services or considering special education services is on the increase. Next slide.
And so major revenue assumptions as we go into the budget year. 2023 is reassessment, so historically that's increased $7 to $9 million. We'll know more as that goes on. We'll hear from the county assessor a couple times throughout the spring. They'll give us a really good idea of where that is trending. And then Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, the legislature will also work on that student adequacy target. There's a little talk on maybe raising that. They haven't raised it in a few years. They're also talking about fully funding transportation again for next year, which would be great for the district and our partner districts as well. Investment earnings, we predict those to increase over what were predicted this year. We're looking at a little over $5 million in investment earnings this year already. And then Medicaid will remain near $9 or $10 million to show you how fluid a budget is. After this was submitted, we have information where that will probably increase to about 11 to 14 depending on claims for next year. Next slide, please. And so you see on this slide, revenue by source. You'll see in that first column the actual numbers from FY21, actual numbers for FY22, the budget for this year, and then the projected budget for next year. And so as you're looking at FY23, we will continue to change and tweak these numbers as we get more and more information. Again, after this was submitted, we had new information on our tax money that came in this year. We're about 4% more than where we thought we would be. So that's going to have an impact on those bottom numbers, on total revenue, and that'll have impact moving forward. So we'll continue to change that as we go. We'll update that for the 28th when we come back to have this approved, and then we'll have a really good idea of what that looks like in the spring, in May when we come back. Next slide, please. So key expenditures, as we go, we are going to begin negotiations shortly, probably in the next week or two. We've done Philip Boyd has done a lot of work with the teams to prep the negotiations, so we're going to move into that pretty shortly. Benefits will continue to increase. We still don't have a percent yet from MMA, but we're looking in that 3 to 4. I've been saying 3 for the most part of the year. It may be closer to that 3 to 4 now. We've had some claims come in that might make that go up a little bit. And then disproportionality and high needs districts will continue to fund both those initiatives as well. Next slide, please. And so as you see, the actual FY21 with salaries, non-certified salaries. So you see total salaries go up across the board, actual FY22, the budget for this year, and then just a very early indication of the budget for next year. That will change based on negotiations, that will change based on benefits and some purchase services. The purchase services and the supplies are initial requests. We'll continue to tweak those as we move further into the spring. So you can see approximately $526 million. We expect that to go up as we go out throughout the spring. Next slide, please.
Good evening. So here we talk here, we look at the Tier 1 schools as we really speak to zero-based budget and focusing, ensuring that here that all of our schools have what they need under needs, budget, wants, and of course, enhancements. Of course, Tier 2 looks at 11 partner school districts here that receive disproportionality funds to support the general education initiative. When we look at Tier 3, those are those 8 high really needs districts based on the DCI that need additional support. I think one of the key pieces here that when we talk about Tier 2 and Tier 3 is that typically Tier 2 and Tier 3 districts are defined typically as historically underserved. And that historically underserved group really delves into 4 key categories. Those who have low incomes, those who are particularly live or have lived in a rural community, those who have limited education, and of course, those who are members of certain racial or makeup minorities. And I bring that up just to define when you take a look at those Tier 2 and Tier 3 schools. Next slide. Again, here we delve into Tier 2 and disproportionality as we look at the districts here. One of the ways here that we look at SSD to really combat and to assist as we talk about disproportionality is the aspects that were developed through the framework to support each partner school district and provide additional supports to each identified school district. Next slide.
Good evening. This information that you have before you is information that has been shared previously, so I won't bore you with going too much into detail. But again, disproportionality exists when we look at those indicators that are before us and when students in a particular racial and or ethnic group are more likely to be in one of those 4 areas. Looking at identified as a student with a disability, a particular disability, looking at the restrictive settings, more restrictive settings, as well as suspensions and expulsions. Comprehensive Coordinating Early Intervening Services, which we call in short CEIS. These are the funds that we set aside. 15% of those funds are set aside to support those 11 districts that are identified as disproportionate. And they are required to identify and address the factors that contribute to the significant disproportionality. These funds can be used to support students ages 3 through grade 12 with and without disabilities, but they may not serve only children with disabilities. You have before you the allocated funds for each of our 11 disproportionate districts as well as special school district at the bottom. The information that you see highlighted in blue are additional Tier 3 supports. Again, we have 6 districts that are identified as high needs as well of those 11 districts that are disproportionate. And so you will see those funds there to support additionally in ways where when we have conversations with partner districts and they develop their goals, these are areas that we want to ensure that we're supporting them with the necessary resources so that they can begin to see success in each of those areas. Next slide.
So when we speak to those Tier 3 districts and really being able to provide additional materials, professional development, coaching, and literacy and numeracy support to ensure that they have what they need to limit the disproportionality. Also, when we talk about Tier 3 and really limiting the disproportionality, we have to ask ourselves a couple of guiding questions. Why do we have the disproportionality? Right, what is the impact of the disproportionality? And then how are we disrupting the disproportionality? Next slide. Truly, when we talk about here, and this shows the map of the DCI index, which is really the distress and at risk, to give the big picture as we really talk about those school districts that are labeled as we budget and we focus on equity. again, we've developed a framework here, and that framework really delves into ensuring that we look at the rates of special education identification, rates of proficiency in math, and ensuring here that through instructional audits and achievement data, and through the models of instruction, that we have what we need to ensure to limit the disproportionality.
What you have before you are our Tier 3 districts. We have 8 districts that are identified as Tier 3, our high-need districts, and of those 8 districts, there are 6 that are identified as disproportionate, and so you see those additional allocations, again, that I mentioned previously, that are set aside to support each of those districts as well. Many of those districts utilize these funds to provide professional development, to bring in additional instructional platforms as well as interventions and other necessary materials to support their goals and action steps.
Slide, please. The staffing request. For the SSD schools and programs, we're asking for the position shown. The social worker for Ackerman is based on caseloads to provide support as a related service. For social work for students at Ackerman, we're asking for an instructional effective practice specialist to really help support our veteran teachers. We have instructional coaches and a curriculum department that help support our new teachers, as Dr. Bolton had stated earlier. We're really looking at honing in and providing that support for instruction in our classrooms to increase the rigor as it goes. There is a 0.5 para or FTE, half-time and para position that we're asking to go to a full-time position. That would support the staff at Litzinger. Next slide, please. For related service, and we're looking at it from a county-wide support, based on caseload numbers and logistics, we're looking at adding a social worker for Parkway, Rockwood, Kirkwood, Webster Groves, and Afton. As I had said earlier, based on the evaluation numbers, we're asking for a school psychologist to be added on to help support the caseloads at Lindbergh. We're asking for countywide support for 2 community access and 2 augmentative communication support based on numbers. Our numbers currently for the current positions are over 200. We would like to get them supporting less than 175 students, and that will allow us. 2 occupational therapists, again, really looking at caseload and support and logistics across the county. 2 effective practice specialists that will allow us to really hone in on support and training for deaf and hard of hearing. Instructional coach with Rittner to help support new staff that has started in that program. And then, of course, for RBTs, we need for supervision and caseload we're asking for 4 certified behavior analysis 10 months and 4 certified behavior analysis 12 months. Next slide.
What you have before you are partner district requests, and I do want to mention that Wendy shared earlier in the previous slide that our enrollment is at a decline. And so we're really wanting to help our administrators, our directors and coordinators to really look deep into need based on the fact that we know we have not had an increased enrollment in many of the districts, but we do want to ensure that we are looking at student-teacher ratio, any special programs that are needed, as well as looking at projected enrollment that could potentially impact our service delivery in a partner district. And so for partner districts, there are 21 positions, teaching positions, minus 1 administrator. Looking at Webster Groves, this is not necessarily to be approved at this point, but under review. Is there a need for us to support our specialized programs that exist not specifically through special school districts, but in that partner district? How can we better support them? Does that look like identifying individuals to be directly responsible not only for that district, but other districts that may have that same need as well? And so of those 20 teachers that you have before you, again, we're looking at student-teacher ratio, specialized programming, as well as projected enrollment, and we want to ensure that we're looking at multiple data sources to support those needs. And you will have the same information, the remaining information on the next slide as well. Not all 22 districts are requesting teachers for this upcoming school year. I want to say it's about 14 out of the 22 districts that are requesting additional support. And so we're having those deep conversations with each of the directors, and we're being extremely transparent in this process with our partner districts as well, ensuring that the superintendent, partner district liaisons, as well as other members are present for those conversations.
Next slide, please. For operations, we have additional staffing requests that are related to providing additional support for current employees. We know that we want to expand our capacity in terms of nursing to include the support because we want to make sure that we are retaining and being able to recruit effectively. We are going to be expanding, as Dr. Bolton has said, the use of our paraprofessional coaches under the teacher retention grant. We are also looking at providing support for current and hopefully future staff members that come to us with disabilities or are differently able. To that degree, we want to make sure that we have someone in a position to lead that, and so we will be asking for approval for a director of ADA and accessibility for staff. Additionally, to look at additional staff support, especially post-COVID, we know that we have had a high rate of anxiety, stress, and depression. We are looking to have a director of staff counseling to be on our staff. They will provide direct support in terms of counseling. We have often relied on current social workers to provide that, so they're doing double duty. And we think that if we want to be intentional, we need to make sure that we have staff that can be staff-facing on this. Additionally, technology has identified a need for us to have the capacity for additional information security. As you have seen in the news, the cybersecurity against school districts and governmental organizations has increased. We need to make sure that our capacity to protect the information of our staff and students is paramount. Additionally, under maintenance of facilities, we are looking at bringing on board a custodial manager and exploring the capacity at one point to bring back in custodial services to the district. Next slide, please. So we're also looking at how do we provide additional supports in our high-needs districts. As has been shared, we know that we're going to be providing additional materials and professional development, and also looking at expanding coaching at our partner districts as well. Next slide, please. Some of the ways that we want to make sure that we are providing the staffing and support necessary, we are looking at some of our Tier 3 staff incentives for high needs districts. Those districts have previously been identified as districts that have also been facing a mix of disproportionality, highest levels on the Distressed Communities Index, and also highest levels of turnover amongst our partner districts. We're looking at expanding pay for our new teacher orientation, and also looking to apply a doctorate incentive for our administrators, which before has not been available. And we also are going to be requesting an increase in our tuition reimbursement funding. This will be important because we want to increase the amount of tuition reimbursement that is available for paraprofessionals who are pursuing teacher certification, but also across employee groups, so that we have other employee groups that may be looking at certifications, industry standards. We want to be able to support their professional development as well. Slide.
And so as you can see, the requests on the slides prior total 54.5, or approximately $4.3 million. We will be reducing 6 positions. No one will lose their job. That's not the way we're going with that. Those are positions that can be reduced, but no one will lose their job. So again, 54.5 positions being added at this point. Some of those positions that had the asterisks may or may not, those are still kind of pending review. So this 54.5 is probably a number that we'll bring back to you that we feel pretty solid about. Next slide, please. And so as you can see, traditional or historical staffing, in 2021, we added 80 positions while reducing 29, so a net of 50.8 positions. 21 and 22, we added 54.5 positions. And then in 22-23, we added 53 and reduced by 6 for a total of 47. So over the last 3 years, we've added 152.3 positions to support our students. And again, next year, at this point, it's 54.5 that we're requesting, 6 that we're going to reduce for a total of about 48. Next slide, please.
So as we move forward, the district has a current vacant paraprofessional position. We want to be clear to say no one is losing positions. What we're going to do is with Ms. Moore, myself, and Dr. Bolton are working at filling using vacant positions that we currently have to fill RBT positions to support our students. And then in the spring, really diving into what positions are going to be needed by using the adult matrix. That is a tool that we're going to use to really hone in and identify supports that individual students need or that classrooms may need to support that. So then we will be addressing the paraprofessional positions at that time.
In addition to that, we are really stressing to our directors as well as our coordinators and principals, again, that no one is losing their job, but we're really trying to help them to understand budgets. And when you have an enormous amount of vacant positions, it's imperative that the board is aware of that, number one, and number two, that we strategize our approach to identify what the true need of additional positions are. And so we want to ensure that we're taking a look at that RBT need, which is a state mandate first, and then, as Wendy indicated, looking at the adult matrix and other data sources to truly inform us of the paraprofessional need. And this has been an ongoing conversation with many of our teams since the start of this school year, and we will continue to dig deep into these conversations to truly help them to understand the budgeting process and how staffing impacts the budgeting process, and to truly identify what those needs are.
And again, the financial projections will change, but we just kind of wanted to give a brief update, a little update that we just asked for a lot. We put a lot of budget requests out there, but wanted to kind of show where this would get us. So we ended 2022, 72.39 or 8 months of reserves. SSD, we're projecting to end this fiscal year at about 70% or 7.9% of reserves. And we're projecting next year, 2024, to end between 65 and 70, approximately 7.4 or 7.8 months. Now, again, as we talked about earlier, that'll probably change. That has the opportunity to go up since revenue came in a little bit higher. But we'll continue to show that to you guys as we go throughout the spring, so that you have a really good understanding of where we're at and where we would fall. Next slide, please. Any questions?
I got some questions. On enrollment, that's the one really kind of I'm interested in. The county enrollment has gone down since 2017.
Yes.
We kind of leveled off, and we started dropping in 2019, had consistent drop since. Do you see this trend continue?
No, I do not. If you look at some of the data that is out there, they're actually looking at students that have not returned to certain partner districts that were there prior to the pandemic starting, were there prior, that they're wanting to know, basically asking hypothetically and trying to find where did these students go. So I don't see that happening based on the evaluations, that even if the St. Louis County numbers will go down or will plateau, our evaluations, our request for evaluations, and students needing support in special school district is on the increase. As I said, we are right now at the total amount of evaluations that we did for the entire year last year, and typically in the spring is when evaluations tend to increase, and so we are getting ready to go into a time where the evaluation will be increasing.
My problem when I'm looking at this, when I'm looking at the numbers, I'm seeing a steady decline. And I also have seen a steady increase in staff. I've got my students going down and my staff numbers going up. If I was on the outside of this, not looking at all this, I'm wondering what's going on here? Because why am I paying more for less people? Why am I having more staff for less people? Is there a way we can explain this? Not just to us here. I'm thinking this is the one that people would pick up.
I will work
I
with my
mean,
colleagues.
do you think that, wait, and if I'm just asking for busy work, I can understand that, but does that make sense to you?
The minutes are going up on the IEP.
Okay, yeah, I'm not disagreeing with anything. I'm just saying, these are the questions I would see people asking me, or asking anybody. Saying, you all are hiring more people, you have less people, why is that needed? It would be nice to have something ahead of time to show people.
Yes, for the related services I asked for earlier for the countywide positions, we are sitting at very high numbers for occupational therapy, all of our OGCOM, our social workers. The social workers are alone or to provide direct minutes that are in the IEP. The related service piece are the minutes that are reflected in the IEP. So as Dr. Keenan shared, minutes across the district are going up, so we need staff in order to have effective services provided for them.
Good, I'm not disagreeing, I just want to have answers, because if someone just looks at your numbers, okay, just looks at your numbers that's presented, you've got 440 less students, okay? That's roughly a 2% drop, okay? Then you have an increase in your expenses of 4%. That's just something, and I'm not doubting that there's more minutes, the students might have more difficulties. I just want a ready-made answer, because these are the questions that I could see being asked.
Absolutely.
I'd like some universal answers to fed to us, so that if somebody asks that, that would seem to me, I'd like to know what type of answers can we get back that makes sense.
Very specifically, yes, sir.
Thank you.
And kind of piggybacking on that information, again, with the numbers going down in reference to the student enrollment, and also the amount of money that we're spending for our employees, staffing is going up, as well as the numbers. Do we think that also in that situation, and this goes back kind of what you were saying, as far as us as an organization, that it creates a view, because I think, and correct me if I misunderstood, we talked about the number of positions now that possibly are requiring doctor's degrees. And so when you start looking at that and you start looking at the equity piece, if we already have communities of individuals who have less opportunity to go to college, then how successful can we actually be in stimulating the equity piece if, in fact, that we've got fewer people going to college from those disproportionate underserved communities, but yet we've got higher standards for the staffing kinds of dollars that we're paying because of that, then it seems as though that there's a yin and a yang to our effort in that situation. I'm not saying that there may not be state standards that have come about, but even at that, if it has been something that the state has implied here recently, or within the last 5 to 6 years, then once again, we're still dealing with individuals and communities that have less opportunity to ever get the degrees. But yet we know that we need more of those individuals involved in serving the kids that we actually serve because of the likeness that that scenario seems to bring into play, or the lack of. We say that we need more minority, I'm going to use the term minority in this case, teachers. We need more people involved from the communities where many of these kids now are coming from. But we're not going to be able to do that if these standards have gotten so high that those people who have the least amount of affordability to go to college to be able to work in the capacities in which we're hiring. I don't know how we're going to accomplish the equity piece to any large degree. And I'm just asking, is it the standards that the state has set, or is it standards that we're setting individually that creates that gap? Right? Making sense to you?
Yes.
Okay.
Let me clarify. Regarding the incentives for the doctors. That's for current employees. That is not an additional requirement for positions outside of certain administrative positions that we may hire for and ask for a doctorate is something that's preferred. In terms of the other support structures for personnel that may not come to us with a bachelor's, that's one of the reasons why we want to expand the ability to access professional development opportunities to include expanding the amount of hours that people can request for tuition reimbursement, and also looking at changing the limitations, because currently, right now, Joint Resolution language limits paraprofessionals to only 3 hours of undergraduate reimbursed credit. And so we are looking to expand that, so it's 6 hours to also include graduate credit hours for those that are seeking to grow in their careers. But we have not instituted any additional doctorate requirements on any positions at this time. I don't see that as a necessity based upon how we deliver services.
I have a couple of just really quick questions. So back on slide 26, we talk about the doctorate incentive and the tuition reimbursement funding. Do you guys see this as allowing us to retain the current staff we have or to expand and recruit staff?
I see it as a both and on that one. I think in terms of retaining staff, we have, over the last several years, experienced a fairly quick use of the current tuition funding. Dr. Hogg had actually brought a request for an increase about a month ago so that we could try to actually respond to the requests that came in this year. However, what happened as of the beginning of August, we had exhausted at that point the allocation from last year. And so we know that we need to increase it. And I think that as we try to grow and looking at the size of our organization, that, I would think that we should explore increasing the tuition reimbursement funding even more in the future, given our size.
Well, I'm excited about that, so I want you guys to follow back with us on it.
Yes.
There was one other, it's a few slides ahead, hold on a second. Going to slide 29, converting the open para positions to the required RBT positions. As we've talked many times, our para shortages are a concern to all of us. How will this impact that? Like, what should we expect looking forward?
And so first, I'll start off with the impact of paraprofessional shortages as it relates to the RBT positions. The RBT positions will first take a look at those adult minutes that are needed, and once we are able to get those individuals established within these positions, it's going to allow us to then determine the true number for paraprofessional needs. At the same time, we know that we continue to have a large amount of paraprofessional vacancies throughout the county. Right now, I want to say we're probably at about a little bit under 150, but that's countywide, looking at partner districts as well as VSP and those programs. And so this will help us, number one, to determine what the true need is. We know that paraprofessional vacancies will continue to exist, and we are looking to ensure that we put together incentives to both recruit and continue to retain paraprofessionals coming into the district to support our students.
So just so you guys know, this is of utmost importance to us, and we appreciate your presentation tonight. We look forward to a follow-up.
Can I ask one more question, please? Jeff, I know this is a preliminary budget. Is there a way that, with the budget that we have, we had talked before, at least it was brought up before, about the possibility of stipends for the districts where we have more difficulty filling the position? There are this is built into this?
If you look
Do you think that's enough to make sure that this can happen? I just see when we talk about equity and we talk about making sure that we fill the needs across the county. I just see that. I'm not saying that's the only way we do it. It seems money may be a way to make it work.
And we'll present on that whole concept at one of our next board meetings. We're talking about that today at our district leadership team meeting. But on page 26, that 3,500 training stipend, that's to be used in those districts that we've identified as those high need. It's not all tier 3 districts. It would be the districts that we are looking at that have disproportionality, that are in that high needs matrix, and then also has had that historic vacancy and turnover rate.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't know that's what what you meant by training.
Just to clarify
But
that.
if that's what it means,
Mhm.
that's great, thank you.
I just have one, or Dr. Moore, I made you a doctor.
Wow.
Director Moore. Now you know.
Didn't know that.
Did you, have a question before I?
No.
Okay. Did you have a question? Okay. So mine was, again, about the enrollment, not really a question, but just what I think probably happened in my crystal ball is that when COVID hit and all the young kids, a lot of young kids got pulled out because there was no vaccines for the young kids, and then they moved to preschool, maybe in kindergarten, and now they're back in the classroom, so now we're probably seeing that uptick of, are a little behind in reading or speech or, anything more. So I could just see nationwide in the next couple of years a big uptick because they missed those important years of preschool and kindergarten.
Their early interventions.
Right, yes, ma'am.
There you go.
We have seen an uptick in the early childhood.
Yeah.
And then there's like a bubble coming up to our elementary schools. That's where you see several of those referrals or requests for additional teacher positions at elementaries because the students weren't leaving and going to the middle school. We're seeing more students coming in. And they're more for those programs that are more significant programs where the kids are with those teachers for the majority of the day. So as we meet and look at each one of the sub-districts that you're working with, we identify those specific things for you to be able to understand those requests for those positions. There's always more to it, but, we like, Ms. Moore had said, we have met with all the superintendents, we've talked to their leadership teams, and we have reviewed the data. There are some of them that we still have to continue to review, but I understand, and that's how we were too. It's like the enrollment is going down, but we know that there's going to be, this trend is starting to move back up.
Yep.
And that enrollment is from our December 1, so now we're starting to see more kids being referred in the spring of the year, and the minutes are going up, especially in the social emotional learning, the behavior pieces. Those are the things that we're starting to see an increase in the IEP minutes.
Right. Any other questions? Thank you. Thank you. Do I have a motion for adjournment?
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
All right, we'll see you guys on Tuesday. Thank you.